The Russian Corps was an armed force composed of anti-communist Russian émigrés in the territory of the military commander in Serbia during World War II, commanded by Lieutenant-General Boris Shteifon. It served primarily as a guard force from the autumn of 1941 until the spring of 1944. It was incorporated into the Wehrmacht on 1 December 1942, and later clashed with both the Yugoslav Partisans and the Chetniks. In late 1944 it fought against the Red Army during the Belgrade Offensive, later withdrawing to Bosnia and Slovenia when the Germans withdrew from the Balkans. Shteifon was killed in April 1945 and was replaced by Colonel Anatoly Rogozin, who subsequently managed to evade the communists by surrendering to the British instead. He and his men were eventually set free and were allowed to resettle in the West. Background information. In the Balkans before World War II, there were approximately 15,000 white Russian émigrés who had fled there in the aftermath of the 1917 Russian Revolution. On 6 April 1941, Axis forces invaded the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Poorly equipped and poorly trained, the Royal Yugoslav Army was quickly defeated. The country was then dismembered, with Serbia being reduced to its pre-1912 borders and placed under a government of German military occupation. Milan Nedeljković, a pre-war politician who was known to have pro-Axis leanings, was then selected by the Germans to lead the collaborationist government of National Salvation in the territory of the military commander in Serbia. The Russian Corps was formed by émigré white Russians and officers of the Russian Imperial Army, which had been defeated by the Communists in the Russian Civil War 20 years earlier. Over the course of the uprising in Serbia in the summer of 1941, the Communist-backed Yugoslav Partisans killed approximately 300 Russian emigrants and injured many more, sometimes in acts of vengeance. In response, local Russians began to organize themselves into self-defense units. At the time, there were an estimated 10,000 Russian men within the borders of Yugoslavia, the majority of whom lived in Serbia. The Russian Corps was founded in Belgrade by General Mikhail Skorodumov on 12 September 1941 and took shape under the supervision of the occupying German authorities, with the cooperation of Nedeljkovic's regime. At first, the group was an independent force reporting to the Plenipotentiary for Economic Affairs, Franz Neuhausen. It was composed of white Russians who sided with the Germans because of their opposition to communism and because they believed that their only hope of a non-communist Russia lay in a German victory in World War II. Russian émigrés from Bulgaria, Croatia and Hungary subsequently came to Belgrade to join the unit. Due to illness, Skorodumov was replaced after only a month by his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant-General Boris Shteifon, who was said to have had warm and friendly relations with Nedeljković. The Russian Corps was initially designated the Independent Russian Corps, before being renamed the Russian Defense Corps on 2 October. It was envisaged by the Germans as a 3,000-strong unit organized into 3 regiments. By late 1941, it had 1,500 members. Recruitment was carried out by Major General Krater, a white Russian émigré in German service who was the head of the Russian intelligence office in Serbia. The corps initially consisted of a single regiment, organized into 4 battalions. Major General Egorov commanded the 1st Battalion, Colonel Shatlov the 2nd, Colonel Ndjevsky the 3rd and Colonel Nestrenko the 4th, respectively. A 2nd regiment was set up on 18 October, commanded by Colonel Dukov. Operations. early actions. Although its aim was to fight communist forces in the Soviet Union, the Russian Corps, when engaged in combat, was used almost exclusively to fight the Yugoslav Partisans in areas of occupied Yugoslavia, composed of 1 cavalry regiment and 4 infantry regiments. It was reinforced with younger émigrés and former Soviet prisoners of war and was armed by the Germans with weapons captured from the Royal Yugoslav Army. Its command language was Russian. Between the autumn of 1941 and the spring of 1944, members of the Corps were responsible primarily for protecting weapons factories, mines, roads, and railroads throughout occupied Serbia in accordance with priorities established by the German High Command. During this time, the Corps was referred to as the Russian Factory Protection Group. It was initially used during anti-partisan operations to guard mines in Krupanj, and later in Bor and Trepča. In November 1941 it began actively collaborating with the Chetniks. By this time the Corps was composed of 5 regiments of about 7,500 men, all of whom were Russian. An attempt was then made to expand it further by recruiting Soviet prisoners. However, this proved unsuccessful and the Corps never operated as a unified fighting force, the regiments being its largest operational units. These were later assigned to act as auxiliaries to German or Bulgarian occupying forces. On 8 December 1941, the Corps defended the Stolis mine against the Yugoslav Partisans. The Corps grew in numbers throughout 1942, following an influx of volunteers from Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania and Greece. During this time, it maintained good relations with the Nedic administration. While guarding facilities, members of the Corps were largely assigned to manning brick bunkers, protecting the railway in the Ibar River Valley, the Bor, Trepča, Majdanpek, and Krupanj mines, as well as Serbian borders along the Danube and Drina rivers, while deployed together with various Serbian collaborationist factions such as the Serbian State Guard and the Serbian Volunteer Corps, with whom they were most closely allied. The Corps also closely cooperated with the Croatian Ustase, and during this period its members often plundered Serbian villages. Initially, the 1st Regiment was deployed in Loznica, Ljubovija and other towns along the Drina. On the other hand, the 2nd Regiment operated in towns such as Negotin, Bor, and Majdanpek. The 2 regiments were operationally subordinated to the 704th German Division. The 3rd Regiment was established in Banjica on 8 January 1942, placed under the command of Colonel Shabalov and deployed to Kosovska Mitrovica, where it was operationally subordinated to the 1st Bulgarian Occupational Corps. The 4th Regiment was established on 29 April with General Cherepov as commander and was deployed to the area around Kraljevo. In May, the Corps was divided into 2 brigades. The 1st Brigade was placed under the command of Major General Dratsenko and its headquarters was established in the town of Arandalovac on the 22nd of May. On the 30th of November, the 4th Regiment was disbanded, its 1st Battalion assigned to the 1st Regiment and the rest of its manpower assigned to the 2nd Regiment. On the 1st of December 1942, the Russian Corps was incorporated into the Wehrmacht and all its members were required to swear an oath to German leader Adolf Hitler. On the 9th of December 1942, the 1st Regiment started to be transformed with the arrival of Cuban Cossacks led by Major General Naumenko. By January 1943, it was fully composed of Cossacks. On 17 March 1943, Major General Gontarev replaced Shabalov as commander of the 3rd Regiment. The 1st Regiment fought in Loznica in April and participated in a large operation in Zaporia on 11–15 May. where it engaged in heavy combat with Communist forces. From 1 to 8 July, the regiment was again stationed in Loznica and Ljubovija, participating in the defense of the Drina bridge at Zvornik against the partisans. During this time the regiment allowed the passage of 379 wounded Croatian soldiers and civilians, 1,000 healthy soldiers and as many refugees, sustaining casualties of 2 killed and 17 wounded. It clashed with the partisans over the village of Nedelika on the 19th of July. Meanwhile, the 2nd Regiment clashed with the partisans around the town of Negoshin. The 4th Regiment was re-established on the 15th of December, and was based in Jagodina, Parasan and Kupria. Its regimental headquarters were moved to Aleksinac on the 30th of April and to Kakak on the 15th of October. Retreat and surrender. Despite numerous clashes with the Chetniks, the Corps focused increasingly on fighting the partisans penetrating Serbia from Bosnia and the Sandak. On the 5th of January, combat with the partisans in Klenak resulted in the deaths of 3 Cossacks of the 1st Regiment. On the 18th of January, the 5th Regiment was formed in Obrenovac. The 3rd Regiment outfought a 2,400-strong partisan force advancing towards Jožanica Banja on the 31st of March. On the 28th of April, the 1st Regiment prepared defences along the Drina in Zvornik, Bajina Bastar and Loznica areas, expecting the 16th and 17th Partisan Divisions to attempt a crossing there. On 1 to 2 May, the 5th Regiment fought the partisans in the village of Maravinci, sustaining casualties of 11 killed and 25 wounded. That summer, the Corps mediated an agreement between the Chetniks and the Germans in which the two parties agreed to fight the partisans in Serbia. On the 18th of July, the 5th Regiment fought in Jožanica Banja and its regimental headquarters was moved there from Obrenovac, with battalion headquarters being established in Zvekan, Jožanica Banja, USCE and Vucetran. Elements of the 3rd and 5th Regiments fought the partisans on 4 to 5 August near the village of Rudnik. The partisans attacked the positions of the 5th Regiment in Leposavic on the 24th of August. In September, the Corps reached its peak of 11,197 members. Several skirmishes occurred between the 1st Regiment and the partisans in the Zvornik and Valjevo areas that month. On 7-8 September, the 2nd Regiment fought partisans at the Abar River, trying to deny them crossing. On the 9th of September, elements of the 3rd Regiment moved to Požega, and on the 11th of September to Kakak. On the 20th of September, the 1st Regiment fought a group of partisans south of Loznica. Major combat between the 1st Regiment and partisans erupted in Loznica itself on the 23rd of September, causing the regiment to fall back to Sabac with losses of 7 killed and 23 wounded. Combat continued daily throughout September, with the 1st Regiment suffering up to 53 casualties per day. On the 8th of October, the 2nd Regiment headquarters in Požarevac were evacuated as Soviet armor approached the town. As parts of the regiment moved towards Belgrade and Groka, the force came into contact with Soviet troops and armor in the Ripanj area south of Belgrade, sustaining heavy casualties. On the 10th of October, the Russian Corps was renamed the Russian Corps in Serbia. Elements of the 2nd Regiment arrived in Sabac on the 22nd of October, then moved to Sremska Mitrovica on the 23rd of October, Vukovar on the 25th of October, Osijek on the 26th of October, and then to Vinkovci and Stari Yankovci on the 28th of October. Further parts of the regiment moved to Zemun on the 13th of October, Ruma on the 14th of October, Vinkovci on the 16th of October, and Stari Yankovci on the 24th of October. On 19 to 22 October, the 4th Regiment fought advancing Soviet troops and partisans and defended defended the Kakak-Kraljevo road. On the 23rd of October, the 1st Regiment abandoned Sabak and Klenak and moved to Lakarak, and then to Tovarnik on the 24th of October, where they were ordered to hold their ground. The 4th Regiment fought in the Kakak area from the 27th of October to the 2nd of November. It faced the Red Army and the Chetnik 2nd Ravnogora Corps before being overpowered and forced to abandon the city. The Chetniks captured 339 of its soldiers and turned them over to the Soviets. On the 12th of November, the 1st Regiment moved via railway through Vinkovci to Biritsko, with elements deployed in Gunja. On the 8th of December it regrouped north of the Sava, and on 11 to 13 December it fought the partisans in and near the village of Babania, killing 43. The 4th Regiment arrived in Sarajevo on 13 to 18 December. Elements subsequently moved to Kiseljak on the 18th of December, fighting partisans in the Kiseljak-Busovaca area on 26-27 December. During this time, the 1st Regiment and a battalion of the 2nd Regiment guarded a bridgehead north of Biritsko in order to allow German forces that were stationed in Greece to withdraw through the town. In January 1945, elements of the Corps participated in the German capture of Travnik, part of Operation Lawin. Afterwards, they withdrew to Slovenia. On the 30th of April, Shteifon was killed while passing through Zagreb. Colonel Anatoly Rogozin then took over as commander. On the 12th of May, Rogozin surrendered to British forces near Klagenfurt. Members of the Corps were then allowed to resettle in the west after hostilities ceased. At the time of surrender, the Corps consisted of 3,500 to 5,584 men. It had suffered 6,709 members killed, wounded or missing from 1941 to 1945. Overall, 17,090 men served in its ranks over the course of the war. Order of battle. Throughout its existence, the Russian Corps was composed of 1st Cossack Regiment General Zaborovskogo, Infantry Regiments 2, 3, IV. In May 1942, the Corps was divided into 2 brigades. The 4th Regiment was disbanded on the 30th of November 1942, and re-established on the 15th of December 1943. The 5th Regiment was created on the 18th of January 1944. Commanders. The Russian Corps had 3 commanders during its existence: General Mikhail Skorodumov, Lieutenant-General Boris Shteifon, Colonel Anatoly Rogozin. Uniform. Members of the Corps wore the uniform of the Russian Imperial Army from the 12th of September 1941 to the 30th of November 1942. The uniform was sometimes worn with pips of the Royal Yugoslav Army, alongside special rank insignia on the collar. Wehrmacht uniforms and insignia were adopted on the 1st of December 1942, but the old uniforms continued to be worn for some time.